Welcome to Stories of Slavery. Today, we're looking back at the story of a brilliant young black boy whose entire family was taken by the Klan. What followed caught everyone off guard. A crowd of 97 formerly enslaved people surrounded those killers and flipped the script on fear in a way no one saw coming. This is a heavy one, so take a breath, get comfortable, and listen closely. Before we dive in, take a second to subscribe and drop a comment letting me know which city and country you're tuning in from. Your support means everything. It helps us make sure these stories stay alive instead of getting buried. Let's get started. It was the summer of 1869, deep in the pine woods of rural Georgia. A 12-year-old black boy named Solomon Graves could read Latin, figure out compound interest, and recite the entire Constitution by heart. That mind of his. It was seen as a threat, something the white men of Calhoun County decided had to be eliminated. One September night, 7 hooded riders came for his family. They burned the cabin to ash and shot everyone inside. His mother, father, 2 sisters, and grandmother. The bodies were left posed in the front yard, meant as a warning to every black family within 50 miles. But by the next sunset, those same 7 men found themselves standing in an open field, ringed by 97 former slaves who had walked through the night to send a message of their own. The riders thought their hoods made them invisible. They thought fear only flowed one way. They were wrong. Before we keep going, make sure you're subscribed and tell me where in the world you're watching from. The next story hits even harder, and you won't want to miss it. Morning came slow and heavy over Calhoun County, Georgia, casting golden light across fields that still remembered the war. For years had passed since Lee surrendered at Appomattox, but the land hadn't forgotten. Broken fences traced old plantations. Chimneys stood alone where mansions once stood. Roads that once hauled cotton were now choked with weeds. In the small settlements along Willow Creek, freed people were building something new from the ashes. The Graves family had staked a claim on 40 acres near the creek's eastern bend. They'd bought the land through the Freedmen's Bureau, using money Isaiah Graves had saved by hiring out his labor during slavery's last years. Every penny the family had went into that purchase. It took 3 trips to the county seat just to finish the paperwork. When Isaiah finally held that deed, he broke down and wept. For the first time in 38 years, he owned something that couldn't be taken on another man's whim. Isaiah was a blacksmith by trade, with hands that could shape iron into just about anything: horseshoes, plows, door hinges, barrel hoops, nails, chains, you name it. His forge ran 6 days a week, smoke rising gray into the Georgia sky. Customers, black and white, came from 3 counties to hire him. They came because Isaiah Graves was the best blacksmith within 50 miles, and even men who hated his skin couldn't argue with his work. The forge sat about 30 yards from the family cabin, a solid pine structure with a stone chimney Isaiah built himself. Inside, tools hung in perfect rows, hammers of 6 sizes, tongs for gripping hot metal, files for smoothing edges, and a massive anvil that took 4 men to put in place. Everything had its spot, just like the ledgers Isaiah kept and the life he lived. His wife, Patience, had been enslaved on the Whitmore plantation before the war. She was tall, steady-handed, with eyes that didn't miss a thing. She'd learned to read and write in secret, watching the Whitmore children during their lessons. She stole knowledge the way others stole food, quietly, in small bites, and kept it hidden until she could use it safely. Now she taught those same skills to every child in the settlement who wanted to learn. Classes met in their cabin 3 evenings a week, using a Bible and an old McGuffey reader a Union soldier left behind. The kids sat on benches Isaiah made, their faces lit by candles and firelight, voices stumbling through letters and words that would one day free them in ways emancipation alone couldn't. But it was their son, Solomon, who turned heads. The boy's mind worked differently. Hear a song once, and he could sing it back perfectly. See a page of numbers, and the answers just appeared. He remembered everything he read, word for word, page after page, like his mind was a library that never closed. By 8, he helped his father with prices and inventory, catching mistakes Isaiah missed. By 10, he read legal documents for neighbors who couldn't read, translating contracts and deeds into plain talk. By 12, he understood property law, contract enforcement, and constitutional rights so well it made white lawyers squirm when he spoke. Trouble began in spring 1869, when Solomon went with his father to the county courthouse in Dalton. Isaiah needed to file for a land expansion, 20 more acres next to his property. It had belonged to a Confederate officer who died at Gettysburg with no heirs. The state seized it for unpaid taxes and put it up for auction. Fair price, standard paperwork. But the clerk, Edgar Sims, a thin man with watery eyes and ink-stained fingers, kept finding reasons to stall. Forms were incomplete. Isaiah filled them out again. Signatures were in the wrong spot. Isaiah signed where told. More documentation needed, proof of citizenship, residence, employment. Isaiah brought it all. Then it had to be notarized by a specific official who was out of town. Then the notary came back, but his stamp was broken. Then the fee went up. Week after week, Isaiah made the 12-mile trip. Week after week, Sims found new hurdles. Solomon noticed something his father didn't. The clerk wasn't following rules, he was inventing them. The boy had spent 3 days reading Georgia property statutes in a law book borrowed from a sympathetic Freedmen's Bureau agent. He memorized the sections, cross-referenced requirements, and compared them to what Sims demanded. The clerk was lying. On their 7th visit, Solomon spoke up. The courthouse was busy that morning, white men lined up behind them. Sims had just demanded another non-existent form. The boy stepped forward, barely tall enough to see over the counter, wearing a worn cotton shirt and patched trousers. He spoke calmly, no anger, just facts. He recited the statute from memory, Section 14, Subsection 3 of the Georgia Property Code of 1866, as amended by the Reconstruction Act of 1867. He listed the actual requirements for land transfer. He pointed out his father had met everyone 7 weeks ago. He politely asked why the clerk kept asking for things the law didn't require. The courthouse went dead quiet. The white men stared. Edgar Sims turned red, then white, then red again. His hands shook as he grabbed Isaiah's papers, stamped them furiously, and shoved them across the counter. The deal was done. That day, Isaiah Graves walked out owning 60 acres. His son walked beside him, quiet and thoughtful. But something else walked out with them, a hatred that would grow in the dark until it consumed everything the Graves family built. Word spread across Calhoun County about the black boy who humiliated the clerk. The story grew with each telling, shifting like clouds in wind. Some said he quoted law like a Harvard lawyer. Others claimed he threatened the clerk with federal prosecution. Some said he called the clerk a liar to his face. By the time the tale reached the back room of Jennings' Tavern, where certain men gathered Saturdays to drink whiskey and nurse grudges, Solomon Graves had become a symbol of everything they feared. The invisible empire had been active in Calhoun County since 1866. Different names in different places: Knights of the White Camellia, the Pale Faces, the Constitutional Union Guards, the Sons of Midnight, but everyone knew what they were. They rode at night in white robes and pointed hoods, faces hidden, horses' hooves muffled. They burned crosses on hillsides. They whipped black men who dared vote. They murdered black men who dared prosper. And they decided Solomon Graves needed to be an example. The local leader was a man called Colonel Bogard Tully. He'd commanded a Confederate cavalry unit during the war, leading charges at Chickamauga and Kennesaw Mountain, building a ruthless reputation that followed him home. He came back to find his plantation burned by Sherman, his slaves freed by Lincoln, his fortune reduced to worthless Confederate bonds. He worked now as a cotton factor, buying and selling others' crops. But his real job was maintaining the old order through fear. He'd personally ordered at least 6 black men killed in the past 3 years, a farmer named Washington who registered to vote, a preacher named James who started a school, a carpenter named Thomas who wouldn't sell his land cheap. No charges. No investigations. Sheriff Marcus Webb belonged to the same den. So did the county coroner, the tax assessor, and 3 of 5 county commissioners. On the night of September 14, 1869, 7 riders met at the crossroads 2 miles north of the Graves property. The moon hung low and orange, swollen and heavy, casting long shadows across the red clay road. Crickets sang. Somewhere, a dog barked twice and went silent. The men wore robes and hoods, though most knew each other well enough that disguises were just ritual. They'd ridden together before. They would again. Colonel Tully sat astride his gray mare, a beautiful animal he'd hidden from Union foragers during the war. He gave final instructions in a near whisper, though no one was around to hear. They'd approach from the east, using the tree line for cover. Surround the cabin before anyone could escape. Set the fire. Shoot anyone who ran. Leave the bodies in the yard as a warning. Be home by midnight. By morning, the troublesome boy and his family would be ash. What they didn't know, they'd already been seen. A young man named Josiah Turner was fishing in Willow Creek that evening, hoping to catch catfish for his mother's supper. He was 19, born into slavery on the Tully plantation itself, freed by the war, now working his own small plot. He knew the sound of hoofbeats at night. He knew what white robes meant. He'd watched his father dragged from their cabin and beaten nearly to death for asking to be paid. When he heard horses, Josiah slipped into the reeds, pressing into the mud, making himself small and still. The riders passed within 20 feet. He counted them, 7. He recognized some horses, Tully's gray mare with the white blaze, Sheriff Webb's roan gelding with the cropped tail. Edgar Sims rode a spotted pinto known across the county. The others were harder to make out in the dark, but Josiah heard enough to know where they were going. As soon as the riders disappeared, Josiah dropped his pole and ran. He ran through dark woods, branches whipping his face, roots grabbing at his feet, lungs burning, legs screaming. But he didn't reach the Graves cabin in time. The family was eating supper when the riders arrived. Patience had made cornbread and beans, simple, filling. Isaiah was telling a story about a customer who tried to pay for horseshoes with a stolen chicken. The kids laughed. Grandmother Hester hummed an old song from her childhood, a melody that crossed the ocean in slave ships and survived everything after. Isaiah heard the horses first. A blacksmith's ears caught every sound. He knew hoofbeats, too many, too fast. He rose from the table, reaching for the rifle by the door. He never got there. The first torch crashed through the window, scattering flames across the floor. Kerosene-soaked rags caught instantly. More torches followed, 3, 4, 5, until the cabin blazed from every side. Patience grabbed the two youngest, Sarah and Emma, ages 8 and 6, and pushed them toward the back door. Gunfire erupted the moment she lifted the latch. A bullet hit the doorframe inches from her head, spraying splinters. A second caught her in the shoulder, spinning her down. She fell, still shielding her daughters, but more bullets followed. Too many to count. Too many to survive. Isaiah charged out the front door, rifle raised. He'd survived too much to die hiding. Slavery, beatings, a world that told him every day he was less than human, he wouldn't die on his knees. He fired once. The shot went wide, but scattered the riders for a moment. Then 3 bullets hit his chest almost together, punching through flesh and bone. Isaiah Graves died on his own doorstep, fingers still on the trigger, eyes still open, staring at the hooded figures who came to destroy everything he built. Inside, Grandmother Hester tried to reach Solomon. She was 67, bent and slowed by decades of labor, but her spirit stayed strong. She'd raised the boy as much as his parents. She taught him his first letters, traced in the dirt. She told him stories of Africa her own grandmother told her, kings and warriors and a homeland that existed now only in memory. She crawled toward the door, flames licking her dress, smoke filling her lungs. A burning beam fell from the ceiling, striking her across the back. She screamed once, then went silent. The fire took her where she lay. Solomon wasn't inside. His mother had sent him to the creek for water, a chore he'd done 1,000 times. He was 200 yards away, bucket in hand, when he saw flames. He ran toward home, heart pounding so hard he felt it in his throat. He crested the rise overlooking their property and saw everything. His father falling on the front steps. Hooded figures circling like wolves. Flames climbing walls, turning everything into smoke. His mother's body in the doorway, still reaching. A hand clamped over his mouth from behind. Josiah had finally arrived, too late to save anyone, but soon enough to save the boy. He wrapped his arms around Solomon and held him still as the boy fought, kicking, biting, clawing. Solomon wanted to run. Wanted to die with them. Wanted to kill the men who did this or die trying. Be quiet, Josiah hissed. You want to die too? Be quiet. You can't help them now. You can only get yourself killed. They need you to live. They need someone to remember. They need someone to tell the truth. Solomon fought until his strength gave out. Then he collapsed against Josiah, sobbing as his home burned 200 yards away. The riders finished with terrible efficiency. They shot the bodies again to be sure. They arranged them in the front yard like a grotesque family portrait. They nailed a message to the old oak tree: "This is what happens to those who forget their place." Then they rode away laughing, torches bobbing in the dark like evil stars. By dawn, the Willow Creek settlement gathered at the ruins. They came in ones and twos, emerging from morning mist like ghosts, drawn by smoke still rising. The cabin was gone, only the stone chimney stood, blackened and cracked. The forge where Isaiah shaped iron for 10 years lay twisted. Tools melted, anvil cracked. In the front yard, 5 bodies lay in a circle, posed in mockery of prayer. Solomon sat by the creek, staring at nothing. His eyes were dry now. He'd cried until no tears came, until his body had nothing left. Josiah sat beside him, watching, silent. The settlement's de facto leader was Ezekiel Stone, 52, born into slavery on a rice plantation near Savannah, freed by Sherman's march in 1864. He'd spent 40 years learning to survive in a world designed to destroy him. Whip scars mapped cruelty across his back, each one for some small defiance. He watched his wife sold away at 25 and never saw her again. He learned to swallow rage until it became a stone in his belly, heavy and cold and permanent. Ezekiel stood before the burned cabin, counting bodies, reading the message nailed to the tree. He read it aloud, voice flat, then folded the paper and tucked it in his pocket. "Who saw them?" he asked. Josiah stepped forward. "I did." 7 riders, white robes, came from the north road around 9. "I was fishing at the creek bend when they passed." "Did you see their faces?" "They wore hoods, but I recognized the horses. Colonel Tully's gray mare. Sheriff Webb's roan gelding. Edgar Sims rides a spotted pinto. I saw that one clear. The others I can't swear to, but I have suspicions." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. These weren't anonymous attackers. These were known men. Powerful men. Men who held office, owned businesses, sat in front pews at the Methodist church Sunday mornings. "What do we do?" someone asked. Ezekiel looked at the bodies, then at Solomon, then at the faces of people who trusted him to lead through impossible times. He'd spent his whole life bending to survive. Lowering his eyes. Saying, "Yes, sir." Pretending not to notice chains or blood. Swallowing rage. But something changed since freedom came. They owned land now. Built homes. Sent kids to school. Voted. Buried their dead in their own cemeteries. Walked roads where once they'd be shot for traveling without a pass. They weren't slaves anymore. Maybe it was time to stop acting like it. "Send runners," he said quietly. "To every settlement within 30 miles. Tell them what happened here. Tell them who did it. Tell them to come. Tonight we gather at the old tobacco barn on Miller's property. Every man who can walk, every woman who can ride. Bring whatever weapons you have. It's time we showed these men that fear isn't a one-way street." The runners left within the hour, moving fast through forest paths and creek beds white men didn't know existed. They carried the story of the Graves family to every black community in the region. Everywhere they went, people listened. They remembered their own losses, their own dead. And they made a decision. By sunset, they began arriving at the tobacco barn. On foot. On horseback. In wagons. From farms and settlements and the edges of towns. Carrying rifles, shotguns, pistols, knives. Axes, scythes, hoes sharpened to razor edges. Some brought nothing but anger and grief and determination that this time, something would be different. Ezekiel counted as they came. 20 by sunset. 40 by full dark. 60 by midnight. Still they kept coming, streaming out of darkness like a river finding its course. Old men who survived slavery. Young men born free. Women who buried children and husbands and fathers. All united by grief and purpose. At 2 a.m., the final count stood at 97. 97 former slaves, most told their whole lives they were property, had no rights, meant nothing. 97 who watched friends and family beaten, sold, raped, murdered with no hope of justice. 97 who finally reached the limit of what they could endure. Solomon sat among them, still silent, staring at nothing. But Ezekiel noticed the boy's hands had stopped shaking. Something settled behind his eyes. Grief still there, overwhelming, terrible, but joined by something else. Colder. Patient. Something like purpose. We know who they are, Ezekiel addressed the crowd. Lanterns hung from rafters, casting dancing shadows on weathered faces. We know where they live. We know they'll do this again to others if we let them. The question is, what are we going to do about it? An old woman named Harriet May spoke. She'd been a midwife on the Tully plantation for 30 years. Delivered Bogard Tully herself, slapped his bottom to make him cry, placed him in his mother's arms. The law won't help us. Sheriff's one of them. Judge dines at Tully's every Sunday. Federal troops are 50 miles away and getting farther. We're on our own. Then we make our own law, said a young man named Marcus, barely 20, who lost his brother to night riders the previous year. We find them. We take them. We make them pay. And hang for it, someone else called out. They'll bring the militia. Burn every settlement in the county. Kill 10 of us for every one of them. They're already burning us, Ezekiel replied. One family at a time. Slow enough no one outside notices. Quiet enough no one outside cares. But the burnings don't stop. The killings don't stop. We've been waiting for someone else to protect us, federal troops, Freedmen's Bureau, carpetbagger politicians. Where are they tonight? Isaiah Graves believed in the law. He filed papers. Followed rules. Trusted the system. And now his children are dead. The barn fell silent. Lanterns flickered. Somewhere outside, an owl called. Solomon stood. Every eye turned to him. Small for his age, thin from hard work and uncertain meals, clothes still stained with ash and tears. But when he spoke, his voice carried something ancient, passed through generations of suffering and survival. My father kept records, he said. Every transaction, every document, every piece of correspondence. He taught me information is power. He said truth written down and witnessed is harder to kill than men. He reached into his shirt and pulled out a leather pouch Josiah retrieved from where Isaiah hid it beneath a loose stone near the forge. The fire hadn't touched it. I know things. Things my father collected. Things I've read and remembered. I know Colonel Tully owes $3,000 to an Atlanta bank he can't repay. I know Sheriff Webb's been stealing tax revenue for years. I know Edgar Sims forged land deeds to cheat 3 black families last spring. I know which men ride with them, which pay them, which look the other way. He emptied the pouch onto a barrel. Papers spilled out, his father's careful handwriting, his own. My father collected this. He was building a case. Going to send it to federal authorities in Atlanta. He believed justice would come through courts. Solomon looked at Ezekiel, eyes dry and steady. I don't believe that anymore. But I believe in what he taught me. If we act tonight, we don't act as a mob. We act as a court. We gather evidence. Take testimony. Document everything so someday someone will know the truth about what happened here. Not their version. Ours. Ezekiel studied the boy. He saw grief, rage, desperate need to make sense of senseless loss. But also intelligence. Purpose. A mind that saw patterns where others saw chaos. All right, he said finally. We do this proper. We start with the men who killed the Graves family. 7 names. We find them. Bring them here. And put them on trial. The plan came together fast. Josiah Turner knew which roads the riders took home. Could identify 3 by their horses alone. Harriet May knew where every prominent family lived, which servants might talk, which back doors stayed unlocked at night. Marcus and a dozen young men had been drilling in secret for months, preparing for a day they hoped would never come but knew probably would. They divided into groups. First group, locate each rider, determine whereabouts. Second, secure roads, ensure no warnings sent. Third, bring the men to the tobacco barn for judgment. No killing unless we have to, Ezekiel ordered. We want them alive. We want them to answer for what they did. And we want everyone to see we're not like them. We don't murder families in their beds. We don't hide behind masks. We stand in light and speak truth. Groups dispersed into darkness. Solomon went with Ezekiel's group, assigned to bring in Colonel Bogard Tully himself. They moved like ghosts through paths worn by generations of slaves moving secretly between plantations. The colonel's house stood on a hill 3 miles east of town, a columned mansion that somehow survived the war intact. Dark windows. Household asleep hours ago, secure in belief their power was absolute. They were wrong. The servant's entrance was unlocked. Old habits from slave days lingered, the colonel still expected black workers to come and go at odd hours. 3 of Ezekiel's men slipped inside while others surrounded the house. Solomon waited in garden shadows, heart pounding. He could see the second-floor window where the colonel slept. Thought about his mother who taught him to read. His father who taught him the value of truth. His grandmother who sang songs of ancestors he'd never meet. His sisters who'd never grow up, never love, never have children. Commotion erupted inside. Shouts. Furniture crashing. A woman screamed once, then silence. The front door opened. 2 men emerged, dragging a figure between them. Colonel Bogard Tully, nightshirt, hands bound, mouth gagged with torn bedsheet. Eyes wild with terror as he recognized the faces surrounding him. Black faces. Faces of people he owned, tormented, killed. Faces he never bothered to see because he never believed they were fully human. Move, Ezekiel said quietly. We've much to discuss before dawn. One by one through the long night, the 7 riders came to the tobacco barn. Sheriff Marcus Webb was taken from his home without guns or badge, dragged from bed while his wife screamed. Edgar Sims found hiding in his outhouse, too drunk to run, too terrified to fight. Deputy Wilson captured on the road, returning from a woman not his wife. The others collected from various locations, each bound, gagged, marched through darkness to face those they'd wronged. By the time eastern sky grayed with first dawn hints, all 7 men knelt in the barn center, surrounded by 97 former slaves with weapons raised and eyes burning with generations of fury. Solomon Graves stood before them. His father's papers spread on a makeshift table. The boy silenced by grief had found his voice again, and had much to say. The tobacco barn smelled of old leaves and dried earth, scent seeped into wooden walls over decades. Lanterns hung from rafters on rusted hooks, casting pools of yellow light that danced with every air shift. The 7 kneeling men cast long shadows across dirt floor, white nightclothes stained with mud and sweat and fear. Around them stood 97 people told their whole lives they were less than human. Tonight, for the first time, the balance shifted. Solomon walked slowly around the circle of prisoners, studying each face with the careful attention his father taught, like ledgers, legal documents. These men killed his family. He expected rage. A burning fury demanding blood. Instead, he felt something stranger. Cold clarity, like before a thunderstorm when air goes still and electric. His mind worked as it always did, cataloging details, making connections, building a case that couldn't be denied. Colonel Bogard Tully knelt at the center, his position reflecting status even in captivity. Even bound and gagged, he tried projecting authority. Gray hair disheveled, face red with humiliation and purple with rage. But his eyes still held contempt, still looked at black faces like insects learning to walk upright. He'd owned 147 slaves before the war. Personally ordered whippings for dozens. Sold children away from mothers, felt nothing but satisfaction at prices. Raped women who couldn't refuse, considered it his right as a man of property. Now he knelt in dirt while those same people decided his fate. Ezekiel Stone removed the colonel's gag, pulling cloth from his mouth with slow deliberation that spoke of years of suppressed anger finding expression. You have something to say. Tully worked his jaw, sore from hours gagged, and spat on the ground at Ezekiel's feet. This is insurrection. Armed rebellion against lawful citizens. You'll all hang for this. Every single one, men, women, children. Federal troops will come. Burn your settlements. String you up from every tree. Make examples remembered for generations. Federal troops are in Atlanta, Ezekiel replied calmly, voice steady as if discussing weather. They haven't come for any families you murdered. Not the Hendersons when you burned their farm last spring. Not Moses Williams when your men dragged him behind a horse for 3 miles. Not the 3 voters you lynched before the last election. Why would they come now? Tully's jaw tightened. No answer, because there was none. Federal troops withdrawing for years, attention elsewhere, commitment to Reconstruction fading. The freedmen of Calhoun County were alone, as always. Solomon stepped forward. Voice steady, though hands trembled slightly at his sides. Colonel Tully, you led the riders who attacked my family's home on September 14th. You organized the raid. Gave orders. Watched your men murder my mother, father, grandmother, 2 sisters. I want to know why. I don't answer to you, boy. Tully loaded the last word with contempt. Not to any of you. You're nothing. Always nothing. Always will be. This display changes nothing about natural order. You'll answer to someone tonight. It can be me, or it can be them. Solomon gestured to the crowd pressing close. 97 faces carved from shadow and lantern light. 97 pairs of eyes holding memories of whippings, brandings, sold children, murdered loved ones. Many of these people remember you from the plantation. Carry scars you gave them, on backs, on spirits. They'd like very much to ask their own questions their own way. I suggest you answer mine instead. Something flickered in Tully's eyes. Fear, maybe, or understanding that his old power meant nothing here. Your father was getting above himself, Tully finally said, words slow, reluctant, dragged out by pressure of watching eyes. Buying land like a real citizen. Building that forge like a real businessman. Teaching that woman to read like a real human being. Then you coming into the courthouse, making a fool of Edgar in front of everyone. Quoting laws like you had any right. Word gets around. People start thinking maybe slurs aren't so different. Maybe they can own property, read books, quote laws like white folks. Maybe they deserve to vote, serve on juries, hold office. That kind of thinking's dangerous. Has to be stopped before it spreads. So you killed a family to stop an idea. We killed a family to send a message. Same as always. Same as our fathers did. Same as we'll keep doing till your kind learns your place. Solomon nodded slowly, absorbing words, filing them away in his vast memory where they'd remain forever. Evidence that could never be lost. He turned to the crowd. You heard him. He admits it. Proud of it. Would do it again tomorrow if we let him go. Murmurs rippled through the barn like wind through wheat. Weapons shifted in tired hands. Someone called for immediate execution. Another seconded. Tension ratcheted higher. Not yet, Ezekiel said, raising hand for silence. We do this proper. Every man gets his chance to speak. Confess. We write it all down. Make a record can't be denied, dismissed, forgotten. This isn't a lynching. This is a trial. First fair trial any of these men ever faced. Interrogations continued through pre-dawn hours as outside sky shifted black to gray. One by one, the 7 men were questioned. Some refused at first, clinging to belief silence would protect them. But 97 armed former slaves, patient and relentless, proved persuasive. They talked. Once started, they couldn't seem to stop. They talked about the night they burned the Graves cabin. Who carried torches? Who fired first shots? Who held Isaiah down while the colonel put 3 bullets in his chest? They talked about other raids. Other murders. The Henderson family burned out in April. The Williams brothers beaten to death in June. Voters lynched before the election, left hanging from a bridge as warning. They talked about the network protecting them. Judges who dismissed charges. Lawyers who provided alibis. Merchants who contributed funds. Ministers who provided moral justification from pulpits Sunday morning. Edgar Sims was most forthcoming. The clerk had always been a coward, brave only behind a hood or safe in his courthouse. Stripped of protection, faced with consequences, he crumbled. He gave names, dates, locations. Describe the Klan's structure in Calhoun County. Hierarchy of command. Secret signals. Oaths sworn on pain of death. Punishments for betrayal. The den meets every Wednesday night in the Mason Lodge basement, he explained, words tumbling faster as if confession could save him. Robes and masks hidden behind a false wall. Weapons cached in 3 barns north of town, rifles, pistols, ammunition enough to arm a small army. Funding from businessmen in Atlanta and Savannah who want to keep black population terrified and compliant. Sheriff Marcus Webb tried bargaining. He'd always survive by trading favors and information. Offered intelligence about Klan activity in neighboring counties. Names of leaders, locations of dens. Offered to testify against Tully and others in exchange for freedom. Promised to bring the whole organization down. Offered money he didn't have, land mortgage to the hilt. When nothing worked, when he finally understood there was nothing he could offer these people wanted, he began to cry. Great heaving sobs from a man who watched countless black families weep over murdered loved ones without feeling anything but contempt. Now he wept for himself. Solomon wrote everything down. Page after page of testimony, confessions, names, connections. Same careful penmanship his father taught. Same methodical organization. Same attention to detail that made Isaiah Graves the best record keeper in the county. This was the record. This was the truth. Whatever happened tonight, this evidence would survive. Each confession witnessed and signed by 3 different people, marks carefully recorded for those who couldn't write. Solomon noted dates, times, descriptions. Cross-referenced testimonies, noting where they confirmed each other and where they diverged. Building a case, not for any court that existed, but for history itself. As sky lightened outside, gray to pink to gold, Ezekiel called for silence. Interrogations complete. Confessions documented. 7 men admitted crimes that would hang them in any just court. Now came the harder question. We have to decide what to do with them, Ezekiel said, voice heavy. I want to hear from everyone. This affects us all. We all carry risk. We all deserve voice in what happens next. Harriet May spoke first. Kill them. Kill them all. Bury them deep in the swamp where no one'll find them. They've killed enough of ours. Time they learn what it feels like to be hunted. Helpless. Die in the dark with no one to save them. Several voices shouted agreement. The barn filled with angry cries. Decades of suppressed rage finally finding outlet. Marcus stepped forward. Face set in grief lines that hadn't faded in 12 months. If we kill them, we become like them. Murderers in the night. No better than the men we hate. Is that what we want? Is that who we want to be? What we want our children to remember about this night? They murdered a 6-year-old girl, someone shouted. An 8-year-old girl. An old woman who never hurt anyone. A mother and father who only wanted to build a good life. What justice except death? What punishment fits except the same crimes done to them? Justice. Marcus replied, voice cutting through noise. There is no justice. Never was. Never will be. Not for us. Not in this country. Not in this lifetime. We can kill these 7, and tomorrow 7 more take their place. Kill those, and 7 more after that. Thousands of them, hundreds of thousands of us. They've been killing us since the first slave ship landed. We can't kill our way to freedom. Has to be something else. Something they don't expect. Something that hurts worse than death. Debate continued as sun rose higher, light streaming through barn gaps in golden shafts illuminating dust and tension. Some argued immediate execution, swift, final. Some argued mercy, release with warning, hope fear accomplishes what justice can't. Some argued public humiliation, let them go but spread the story so everyone knows who they are and what they did. Others warned survivors would bring retribution. Federal troops might not come for murdered black families, but they'd certainly come for murdered white men. Willow Creek settlements would burn, inhabitants slaughtered in numbers making tonight's killings look like nothing. Solomon listened to all of it, turning each argument over, weighing consequences, considering outcomes. He thought about his mother who believed in education as path to freedom. His father who believed in law and documentation, truth written down and witnessed harder to destroy than truth living only in memory. His grandmother, who survived decades of slavery through patience and cunning and unbreakable spirit, who told stories of ancestors resisting in obvious and subtle ways, never stopping even when hope seemed hopeless. What would they want him to do? What would honor their memory? What would make their deaths mean something more than just another entry in endless ledger of black suffering? He stepped into the barn's center next to kneeling prisoners. The crowd fell silent, every eye on the 12-year-old who lost everything and somehow found strength to stand. "I'm the one who lost most tonight," he said, voice clear and steady in sudden quiet. "I'm the one who'll carry this grief for the rest of my life, however long that is. So I'm going to say what I think should happen. Then you can decide if you agree." He paused, gathering words that would shape the rest of his life and everyone in this barn. "If we kill them, we give them power. We prove every lie they tell about us. Become the violent savages they claim we are. Dangerous animals needing control and destruction. Every newspaper in the country prints stories about black uprising in Calhoun County, murderous freedmen slaughtering innocent white citizens in their beds. No one remembers what they did to my family. No one remembers the Hendersons, the Williams brothers, the voters lynched. All anyone remembers is what we did tonight." He held up the stack of papers. "This is their confession. In their own words. Names, dates, crimes, everything they did, everything they planned. Everyone who helped. If they die tonight, this dies with them. No one believes a document written by former slaves about dead white men. They'll say we forged it. Tortured them into lies. Say whatever they need to make themselves victims and us villains." He lowered the papers, looked around at surrounding faces, faces that suffered so much, deserved justice but might have to settle for something else. But if they live, if they carry this shame, if the world sees what they confessed, then truth survives. Truth's harder to kill than men. Truth spreads. Truth grows. Truth waits. My father taught me that. My mother taught me that. I believe it even now. After everything. What do you propose? Ezekiel asked. We let them go. The barn erupted. Shouts of protest. Cries of disbelief. Weapons raised. Someone called Solomon a coward. Someone else said the boy lost his mind along with his family. Noise deafening, overwhelming, threatening to tear fragile unity apart. Solomon raised his hand and waited. Slowly, reluctantly, noise subsided. Let me finish. We let them go, but not before we mark them. Brand them with what they are, so everyone who sees knows truth about the men they're looking at. And not before we send copies of their confessions to every newspaper in Georgia, every federal office in Washington, every church in 3 states. Let them walk free and see how free they really are when everyone knows truth about who they are and what they did. Noise subsided further. People exchanged glances, considering, turning idea over. What stops them from lying? Marcus asked. Saying we tortured them, forced false confessions at gunpoint. Their word against ours. We all know whose word the world believes. Solomon smiled. Not happy, not a child's smile, but something older, harder, more knowing. Because we're going to give them something to remember us by. Something they can't hide, deny, or explain away. Something that tells truth even if their mouths speak lies. He walked to a blacksmith's brazier set up in the barn corner, coals glowing red in morning light. Several iron implements rested among coals, heating slowly, ends shaped into letters soon burned into human flesh. My father was a blacksmith, Solomon said, voice carrying to every corner. He taught me how to work iron. Heat it till it glows. Shape metal into whatever form needed. Make a mark that never fades, never heals, never goes away, no matter how much time passes or how much the bearer wishes it would. He pulled one iron from coals. Its end shaped into a letter. K, for Klansmen. Burned into the cheek where everyone can see. Let them explain that to neighbors. To children and grandchildren. To God when they stand before judgment. Every day for the rest of their lives, they'll look in the mirror and see what they are. Every person they meet will see. They'll carry truth on their faces where it can't be hidden or denied. Prisoners began screaming behind gags, animal terror replacing human arrogance. They thrashed against bonds, but hands holding them were strong and unyielding. Hands that picked cotton, cut cane, built houses, dug graves. Hands that wouldn't let go. Ezekiel looked at Solomon, then at the crowd, faces trusting him to lead through impossible night. We vote. All in favor of the boy's proposal. Hands rose slowly at first, then quicker as neighbors saw, as idea took hold. Not everyone. Some kept hands down, still wanting blood, still believing only death could pay for what was done. But enough. More than enough. It's decided. We brand them. Release them. Spread truth far and wide so it can never be buried, forgotten, or denied. The branding took place as sun climbed above Treeline, golden light streaming through barn gaps illuminating the scene. Each man received the mark on his right cheek, just below the eye where it could never be hidden by beard, hat, or turned head. Iron sizzled against flesh. Smell of burning skin filled the barn, mixing with old tobacco and fear. The screams were terrible, worse than most witnesses ever heard. Worse than slaves being whipped. These were screams of men who never knew real pain, who dealt suffering their whole lives without experiencing it. Now they learned what they'd been doing. Now they understood for just a moment what it felt like to be helpless and hurt and unable to escape. No one looked away. This was justice, not of courts and judges and laws written by men who owned slaves and protected slavers. Something older. More primal. Something predating constitutions and courthouses and all systems built to protect men like these while crushing everyone else. When it was done, the 7 men were loaded into a wagon. Wounds bandaged, not from mercy, but to prevent death before they served their purpose. They needed to live. Walk through town with that mark on their faces. Tell everyone who asked what happened and who did it and why. They were driven to the main crossroads outside Dalton and dumped in dirt as morning traffic began. Farmers bringing vegetables. Merchants opening shops. Women walking to church for early prayer. All stopped and stared at 7 men lying in road, prominent citizens, distinguished community members, now marked with scarlet letter burned into flesh. First to approach was a farmer named Jenkins, bringing cabbages to general store. He recognized Colonel Tully immediately, sold cotton through Tully's brokerage for years. He saw the brand on the colonel's cheek. Saw other men, all familiar, all marked same way. He dropped cabbages and ran to spread news. Within hours, story was everywhere. The colonel who terrorized the county now bore a letter proclaiming him Klansman to everyone who looked. The sheriff who protected murderers, took bribes, looked other way while families burned, marked as one of them. The clerk, the deputy, the others, all branded with same shame. Some white citizens were outraged. Gathered on street corners, in tavern back rooms, demanding militia called out. Black settlements burned in retaliation. Every freedman in the county taught a lesson they'd never forget. But others hesitated. They'd heard about confessions. Seen copies circulating, left at newspaper office, tacked to Methodist church door, delivered to federal officials' homes. Details damning. Names of victims, dates of attacks, methods of murder, all in prisoners' own hands, witnessed and signed by fellow Klansmen. Evidence irrefutable. Truth undeniable. For first time, people who looked the other way for years were forced to confront what they'd ignored. Story spread like wildfire carried by wind. Within a week, reporters from Atlanta arrived in Dalton. Asking questions, interviewing witnesses, examining confessions. Within 2 weeks, newspapers in New York, Philadelphia, Boston printed accounts of what happened in Calhoun County, Georgia. The brand became a symbol, reproduced in illustrations appearing in papers across country. Artists drew it. Editors wrote editorials about it. Ministers preached sermons about it. For first time, the nation saw true face of terror in the South. Not anonymous figures in white hoods. Not mysterious night riders disappearing into darkness. Named men. Known men. Branded men who confessed in their own words to systematic murder and intimidation. The myth of noble lost cause took a blow in that county from which it would never fully recover. Colonel Bogard Tully tried to flee. Packed valuables, rode east, hoping to reach Savannah and book passage somewhere no one knew his face or crimes. He made it to Savannah waterfront before recognized by a freedman who saw newspaper illustrations. Crowd gathered, not to hurt, but to point and whisper and laugh. The great men. The powerful men. The men who terrorized entire county for years, reduced to curiosity, sideshow, monster with monstrosity written on his face for all to see. He shot himself 3 weeks later in a rented room overlooking harbor. The letter blamed everyone but himself. Cursed freed slaves who humiliated him. Cursed federal government that failed to protect him. Cursed God for allowing natural order overturned. Buried in unmarked grave because no cemetery accepted his body. Sheriff Marcus Webb was removed from office by governor, no choice after confessions became public. Newspapers nationwide asked why Georgia allowed a self-confessed murderer to hold a badge. He spent remaining years as farmhand on someone else's land, taking orders from men he once terrorized, brand on his cheek announcing shame to everyone he met. Died of drink in 1877, found dead in ditch outside town, no one came to claim his body. Edgar Sims disappeared completely. Some said he went west, changed name, tried starting new life where no one knew what he did. Others said killed by former Klan members who feared what else he might confess. Body never found, no one looked very hard. The other 4 scattered to various fates. One killed in Texas barroom fight, shot by men who recognized brand and refused to drink with Klansmen. One found religion, became itinerant preacher, spent remaining years traveling town to town preaching repentance. 2 simply vanished into vast American interior, carrying their brands like portable prisons following them wherever they went. The settlements along Willow Creek were never attacked again. Message received and understood. These weren't helpless victims. Frightened freedmen submitting quietly to terror. These were people who'd fight back. Document. Make truth known no matter cost. Terror continued other counties, other states. But Calhoun County, Georgia, became island of relative peace in sea of violence. Solomon Graves didn't stay in Georgia. Grief too heavy. Memories too sharp. Ashes of family's cabin too close to bear. He traveled north with copies of documentation, confessions and evidence his father gathered before death. Found his way to Washington, D.C., where Congressman Benjamin Butler from Massachusetts was collecting testimony about Klan violence for congressional investigation. Solomon testified before the Joint Select Committee to inquire into the condition of affairs in the late insurrectionary states in spring 1871. He was 14 years old. Spoke for 3 hours without notes. Memory providing every detail, every name, every date with perfect accuracy. Presented documents corroborating testimony. Answered questions from skeptical Southern congressmen with calm precision that left them unable to challenge his account. His testimony filled 47 pages of official congressional record. Cited in committee's final report documenting 153 murders and thousands of whippings and beatings across former Confederacy. Contributed to passage of Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, giving federal government new powers to prosecute terrorist organizations and protect citizens' rights regardless of race. For a brief moment, real change seemed possible. Federal troops sent to trouble spots. Klan leaders arrested and prosecuted. Violence diminished, driven underground by threat of federal intervention. But moments pass. Attention wanders. Priorities shift. Within a decade, Reconstruction was over. Federal troops withdrew. Gains made were systematically destroyed. Men who terrorized black citizens returned to power, found new ways to enforce old order, built system of segregation and oppression that would last another century. Solomon saw it all happening. Watched promises broken, rights stolen, hope extinguished. But he didn't despair. Didn't give up. Did what his father taught. He documented. Recorded. Built record that couldn't be denied or forgotten. He went on to study law at Howard University, one of few institutions accepting black students. Became one of first black attorneys practicing in Massachusetts, specializing in civil rights cases, defending freedmen cheated, attacked, denied constitutional rights. Won some, lost others. Never stopped fighting. Never stopped believing truth carefully preserved and widely spread was harder to kill than men. He married in 1882, a schoolteacher named Eliza who reminded him of his mother, a woman who believed in education with same fierce faith Patience Graves held. They had 4 children together. He told them story of their grandparents, aunts, great-grandmother. How a community of 97 former slaves stood together in a tobacco barn and demanded justice when no one else would give it. He returned to Georgia only once, in 1915, when 58, hair gray, body slowing. Visited site where family's cabin stood. Land changed hands several times over decades. Current owners, white farmers from up north, didn't know history. But old oak tree still stood. Beneath it, Solomon found stone marker Ezekiel stone placed there 46 years before. Inscription worn but legible, carved deep into granite so time and weather couldn't erase it. Asterisk Isaiah, Patience, Sarah, Emma, and Hester graves. Murdered September 14, 1869. Remembered forever. Justice was served, asterisk. Solomon knelt in dirt beneath the tree and wept. For first time since that terrible night, he allowed himself to feel full weight of grief. Accumulated sorrow of 46 years missing his family, wondering what they'd become, carrying their memory like stone in his heart. He wept for mother who taught him to read, who stole knowledge and passed it like sacred flame. For father who taught value of truth, believed documentation could change world. For grandmother who sang him to sleep with songs from Africa, melodies that survived Middle Passage and slavery and war, surviving as long as anyone remembered to sing. For sisters who'd never grow old, never love, never have children, lives cut short before becoming what they were meant to be. He wept for himself, the boy who lost everything and somehow found strength to go on, testify, fight, build life from ashes. And he wept for 97 people gathered in that tobacco barn on a September night in 1869, who chose justice over vengeance, truth over violence, hope over despair. When tears spent, he rose and looked around. Fields stretched horizon, green and gold in summer sun, planted with cotton by workers no longer slaves but not quite free. Birds sang in trees. Creek murmured over stones as it had for countless generations before any human set foot. World changed since that night, and not changed. Klan rose again, stronger and more numerous. Millions members nationwide. Jim Crow replaced slavery with new oppression, in some ways worse because pretending to be legal and legitimate. Black Americans still lived in fear, still died at hands of men facing no consequences, still waited for justice never coming. But truth survived. Documentation survived. Story survived. And as long as story survived, there was hope. Not easy hope of quick victories and simple solutions. Harder hope of people knowing struggle might last longer than lifetimes, and choosing to fight anyway. Solomon returned to Massachusetts. Continued work till health failed. Trained younger lawyers to carry on. Wrote articles, gave speeches, never stopped documenting, fighting, believing someday somewhere truth would win. He died in 1921, surrounded by children and grandchildren. Last words to eldest grandson, young man named Isaiah, after great-grandfather he never met, write it down. Whatever happens, write it down. They can kill us. Burn our homes. Deny everything. But they can't kill truth if we make sure it survives. Write it down. Remember. Never stop fighting. The grandson did as told. Became journalist, then historian. Wrote books about Reconstruction, about Klan, about countless acts of resistance white history tried to erase. Made sure great-grandparents' story was told. Made sure 97 people gathered in that tobacco barn were remembered. Story spread. Passed through generations. Told in churches, schools, living rooms. Became part of collective memory of a people who survived the unspeakable and refused to be erased. Because that's what they wanted us to forget. That there was resistance. Courage. In darkest moments of American history, ordinary people found extraordinary ways to stand together and fight back. Victims of terror weren't passive sufferers waiting to be saved, they were active agents of their own liberation who created their own justice when none was offered. Klan killed the Graves family because they feared what a smart black boy represented. Feared education. Competence. Intelligence. Feared possibility that everything they believed about white supremacy was a lie. That black people weren't inferior. That only way to maintain illusion was through violence and terror. They were right to be afraid. Because Solomon Graves survived. And he carried truth with him. And truth outlasted every one of his family's killers. Outlasted Klan. outlasted Jim Crow. Still here today, being told, remembered, passed to new generations who need to know resistance is possible, courage is real, truth can survive even when everything else is destroyed. The 97 people gathered that night understood something profound. Understood violence alone couldn't save them. Killing enemies would only create more. Real battle wasn't with rifles and torches, but with pens and papers and persistent, patient work of documentation. They created record that couldn't be denied. Forced confessions that couldn't be unsaid. Spread truth so far and wide it could never be fully suppressed. And they won. Not completely. Not permanently. Struggle continues today, will continue long after we're gone. But they won that battle. Proved former slaves could organize, strategize, outthink oppressors. Proved courage, intelligence, solidarity could defeat terror. That's legacy of the reckoning at Willow Creek. Not vengeance, justice. Not violence, truth. Not despair, hope. 97 people stood in a circle around 7 murderers and chose to be better than men who wronged them. Chose to leave a record instead of pile of bodies. Chose to brand enemies with shame rather than execute in secret. Not a perfect choice. Some of 97 disagreed. Some wanted blood and were denied. Some felt mercy was weakness and justice incomplete. But history vindicated their decision. Confessions survive. Testimony survives. Story survives. And as long as it survives, it teaches. Teaches ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Teaches oppressed can resist. Teaches truth carefully preserved and widely shared is the most powerful weapon of all. I hope you found this story powerful. Leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I've handpicked 2 stories for you that are even more powerful. Have a great day.